Hello, it's Uncommon Fossil here with 10 types and getting back to the Reasonably Effective podcast. This is officially, I guess, labeled episode 2. And just a little seeing things have been for you. How has your week been going for you, 10 types?
It's been pretty good. I've been messing around with the new set some more with Crown Zenith. I've been playing with some control decks with the new Oranguru and then the new Calyrex, which are both kind of fun. I don't know if they're that good, but overall the set's kind of introduces a few funny cards. A lot of the cards are still pretty expensive, which is a bit annoying, but overall I think it's pretty fun, and I haven't been doing too much else. But yeah, I've been also doing a bunch of Marvel Snap. So yeah, what have you been doing though?
Yeah, I mean, life itself outside of gaming has been busy for me, so my Pokemon in gaming time has been reduced. I have not really been doing the Crown Zenith cards at all. Been just doing the daily challenges in live, and actually tried out the new Eternatus deck, which I managed to win without ever attacking with Eternatus a bunch of times, just wheezing them, grinding them down there, and some PTCGO, just this and that. And I still am trying my hand at Magic the Gathering too, which is actually a little bit fun too.
Yeah, I
Uh,
guess so.
I'm enjoying it. I don't know long term how it is, but I'm in that new phase where there's a lot of newness, and so excitement comes with it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. When you like play a new game or like a new format, it's really fun just messing around and learning this stuff. And you're not going to get bored anytime soon because there's obviously a lot of depth. The online client there also has a lot more like options as well, and it's just better overall, right?
Yeah, it's much more developed than PTCGO or Live. You have a lot of different gameplay modes to choose from, which Pokemon seems to not want to do and stuff. So there's positives to it. I whether it's just very different game too, which I'm enjoying.
Yeah. So, but I think it's time to talk about some Pokemon now. That's what everyone's here for. And we're
Yes.
gonna start our first segment, which is involving like quiz type thing again, game show, trivia style thing. Pretty much we have multiple choice questions for the other person based on stats and stuff. And you have three choices, and I'll start with my first question to you. And which of
Okay.
these? What were you saying?
I just said sounds good.
Okay. So, of course, it sounds good as I always do. But which of these Pokemon V Stars V Star power does the most damage? Is it
Okay.
Arceus V Star, Giratina V Star, or Mawile V Star?
Was it the V Star power that does the most
Yeah,
damage?
specifically the V Star power.
Okay, so Arceus, Giratina, and Mawile,
Yeah.
and I believe that's Giratina.
Um, and can you explain that as well? Why?
Uh, well, I see. I haven't. Giratina's V Star. I see. I don't remember what it does. Arceus's V Star power. Just gets you cards, and Mawile. I really don't know what it does at all. I know Giratina's a pretty good attacker, so that's why I chose that one.
Well,
I got to
Giratina
say.
V Star's V Star power doesn't actually do any damage. It does the instant KO.
Okay.
But none of
Oh,
them do
that's
any
right.
damage. So
So,
they were all right. Yeah. So
okay.
even if you had said Arceus there, you'd be correct. Mawiles is essentially it's a Guzma, except
Hmm.
you need to switch Mawile V Star into the active, but it's an ability. It doesn't do any damage. And then
Okay.
Giratinas or Arceus, none of them do any damage. Giratinas is the closest because it gets a KO, but it doesn't actually do damage. So yeah, there wasn't really a wrong answer there, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I want to play Giratina. It's been pretty good. It initially was expensive, so hopefully I'll pick it up and start playing with that soon.
hmm
All right, so question for you here. Which of the following amazing rare Pokemon does the most damage? We have Zamazenta, Yveltal, and Reshiram.
I think and we're like ignoring weakness and all that, right? I'm assuming.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, yep,
it's
just
got
the
to be
regular attack.
Reshiram, which does I think a total of 330. It does 270 to the active and then 60 to itself as well.
That's true. I wasn't thinking about the 62 itself, but you're right. That's even better than I was, yes. And Zamazenta does 180, which is clearly less. And the Yveltal is very powerful, but it knocks Pokemon out, which does technically zero damage, as we were talking about before with Giratina.
Yeah. And there are like I think I think Reshiram's it's generally seen as like the most powerful in terms of big damage, right? It does. It's kind of
Yeah.
obviously you've also just one shots though. Both of those see a lot of play though with Lugia, so
I
pretty
mean,
good.
there's other ones like which depend on energies discarded and such, like with Rayquaza. So,
Oh
but
yeah,
I want to stay away from that because that complicates
yeah, like
things.
Rayquaza, Zacian, those types you don't really want to go into. But so I'll go to my next one. A bit harder now. There is an
Okay.
actual like right answer and wrong answers here. But which of these Pokemon has the most HP? Is it Radiant Charizard, Radiant Blastoise, or Radiant Venusaur?
Radiant Charizard, Radiant Blastoise, Radiant Venusaur.
Yeah, some
Um,
weird Pokemon, but not too weird.
so I'm partly just trying to think through what they are. Um, I'll say Radiant Blastoise.
No, it is actually Radiant Charizard. With it, Radiant
Real? Oh,
Charizard,
wow.
yeah, it has 160.
Okay.
Radiant Blastoise has 150, and Radiant Venusaur also has 150. It's I guess it's because Charizard's like an attacker, whereas the other two are more of
Hmm.
support Pokemon. But honestly, I was surprised at that as well. Generally, I think of Blastoise and Venusaur as being bigger, but Radiant Charizard actually has the most health here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean Charizard's obviously hugely popular, but I don't think of it as a tanky Pokemon. So, okay. Interesting there. All right, and my second question gets a little trickier also for you. So, see what you how you handle this one. So, which Pokemon card lets you draw the most cards? Okay. Galarian Articuno V, Rotom V, or Entei V. So, going with the V Pokemon.
Let's see. So Glen Articuno and Entei, I think they both draw one. Wait, you said they're all the Glen Articuno V, Entei V, Rotom V?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
what's Rotom V? Was Rotom V draw three and your turn ends? I think it's you said most draws the most cards, right?
Draws the most.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think it's Rotom V, right?
Yep, you did. You got it. Rotom V draws three, turn ends. So good for a setup, but hopefully you don't have to use it after that after turn one.
Yeah, it's and that's like essentially the same as Zacian as well, right?
Yes. Yep, the same as that. And I think there might be some others too. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that wasn't too bad. I haven't played Rotom. Rotom's more of your deck, but
Right.
yeah.
But I
Okay.
figured you're aware of it though.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But now moving on to the last question. These are
Hmm.
also three Pokemon V. Which of these
Okay.
though has the lowest retreat cost? And
Hmm.
the first one is Morpeko V. The second one is Aranguru V. The third one is Omastar V.
Ooh, wow. Okay, so not Pokemon V Pokemon I played a lot with, and retreat cost is not something I pay that
Oh,
gets a
sorry.
lot of
Let me make
attention.
one clarification. Morpeko V
Yes.
from Sword and Shield or Shining Fates. They're the same one. There's um, the
Okay,
lightning one, not the dark one.
okay. So the one was the Omastar V, correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to go with Omastar V. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, you actually got that one right. It is Omastar V. Morpeko V and Rancor V both have a retreat cost of 2. Omastar has a retreat cost of 1.
Okay. All right. Good. Glad I got. I that was leading. I certainly lent that way and worked out good.
Yeah.
All right. And so I have a bit of a strange question for you, but here, which uh, attack, which of these attacks has the most different Pokemon cards with that attack on it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, not counting alternate arts and stuff. But so the first one is Mad Party. So therefore,
Yep.
that gives you you get a sense of where it's going. The
Yeah,
second is
yeah.
Let's All Roll Out,
Uh-huh.
and the third one is Triple Draw.
Triple draw.
Yes.
Oh, I don't really know how many Pokemon have triple draw. So let's see. Med Party, there's 4. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's 4.
Hmm.
Let's see. Let's all roll out. I think there's like 5 or something. There's I think Wooloo, Togedemaru, uh, Jigglypuff, Azumarill, and I think there's another one. Um, but I don't remember what it is. But I think there's 5. Oh, triple draw. I have no idea what has triple draw.
I know it's one I wasn't really aware of, but drawing three is pretty decent though too. So
It's not bad. I'll go. Let's all roll out. I don't know.
Okay, so it is Let's Roll Out. You
Let's
got that one
go.
correct. There's actually six of them.
Oh, there's
Uh,
the Blissey. I forgot about Blissey.
right, the
And
Blissey, the
then,
late, yeah.
but what
Right,
was
and
the
that
other?
party there's four. So Maril, Jigglypuff,
Yeah. Oh,
Sandshrew.
Sandshoe, and then some Meryl. Yeah.
Yep. So you get six there, and then there's four with triple draw. Um, a Honchkrow, stage ones, Hisuian Electrode, stage one. You have a Whimsicott, stage one, and you have Vaporeon V, which has it also.
Okay. Oh yeah, I remember Vaporeon V and then Hisuian Electrode. I've seen both of those actually play. Obviously Vaporeon for the V Star, but then I
Mhm.
have actually seen Hisuian Electrode V Star played. So yeah, I'm
Right.
glad I got that one right.
Yeah, that one was a bit of throwing one at you there. So
Yeah. So
all
let's
right,
go. I won. I won this round.
you won again. Yep. So you got all three right. So I'll have to ratchet it up and make it tougher next
Oh
time.
no.
So.
Okay.
So that racks up that. So the next segment, we're looking at a card, or which may lead to a deck, and this one certainly does. And the card we're doing is Rapid Strike Malamar. Something most people are familiar with. A card I've enjoyed playing quite a
Uh,
bit. A card that you really have, I think, disliked
yeah.
o- over time.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's the Pokemon itself evolves from Inkay. Malamar is a rapid strike card, as said. It's got 120 HP. It does 40 damage per rapid strike card in your hand that you reveal, and they all get shuffled in, and that the cost of that is just one psychic energy. So ability to do big damage on a single prize for one energy, it's very appealing in that sense. So it can get to knocking out Vs, I think, pretty easily. V maxes are tough, and V stars I think have hurt the deck too.
Yeah. So as you said, I don't like this. I'm not sure exactly why, but I found the deck to be very linear and boring. Pretty much in any Rapid Strike Malamar deck, the only attacker is Rapid Strike Malamar.
Yep.
You can occasionally see. I think the only other tech option as an attacker is Basimian, which is pretty bad. But the
Yep.
Rapid Strike Malamar, it's pretty boring. You just want to draw as much as you can every turn. Really, there's not too many questions about that. The sequencing's relatively straightforward if you played the deck some. I'm not super great with the sequencing, but I have not played the deck like almost at all. So yeah, I don't enjoy it. I feel like it's not a fun deck for me, and it doesn't do anything particularly interesting.
I mean, I think that the sequencing it is about the sequencing because when I've played it, I often play zero gust in it. Some people may put in a boss or a Pokemon catcher, but I think for deck space, it's not great to have your supporter. You need a supporter to draw cards because you're trying to get a lot of cards in hand. So you're using your Bruno or Cynthia's Ambition or Karina's Focus to draw cards. So boss does usually you don't want to play a boss in the deck. But how to get, it's about getting to the number of damage you need to knock out the opponent's active. You have to have at least an Inkai on the bench because otherwise you assume you're getting knocked out, and if you can't attack a turn, you're in trouble. And then you want to give yourself the best position for the next turn also. So it's a little puzzle, fairly simple, but it's a number of decisions. What supporter you have and where when you sequence the supporter is probably the biggest decision you're making on a lot of turns.
Yeah,
And
no,
you know, and
yeah.
go ahead. You don't. It doesn't seem like the other part is deck building is big on this as many things, and the basic deck choice decision from the beginning was Cinccino engine versus Inteleon engine. I think the Cinccino engine was kind of the initial one that saw play, and I still like that engine because you don't start as well. The Inteleon engine really had the most success. I think it made top cut. At a regional event. I think so it had success, which you probably don't like to see a deck like that get success, but it did. And because you with the Inteleon, the Inteleon cards, a lot of those are rapid strike cards, which help your damage, and you can search for the card you need, so you can get the big damage early, easier with Inteleon. But with Cinchino, you set up your bench with the Cinchinos, you get the cards you don't want discarded, so your deck really gets concentrated with Rapid Strike cards in the later turns, and you can do big damage late, which is what I think the deck likes to do to me when it works. You can just do big damage, even often late in the game by turn 3 or 4. I can knock out, might be able to one shot a VMAX Pokemon, and that's and if you can do that with a single prize or knock out a VMAX, you're in great shape.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do like decks that build up to big damage, but not this deck. I like if I'm one shotting a big V Max, V Star, whatever, with a single prizer, I usually want to do it on a basic. That's why I like stuff like
Mhm.
Baby Cephalon more, as well as
Yeah,
stuff like some of the amazing rares you mentioned earlier, like Yveltal as well as
yep.
Rayquaza. Um, and then also I don't know, I feel like it's not it's kind of awkward to set up. You're doing these big pushes to do big damage output, but then you're also falling. You need to like set up your bench, or else you're just gonna get
Hmm.
completely messed up. And I feel like honestly, it's a worse version of Lunatone and Solrock.
Well, I mean, this was obviously around before that, and maybe
Yeah,
Lunatone Soul Rock, which I love that deck also, and play that too much. And that is probably better. You're correct. It sets up simpler. To play this deck, it takes patience. You sometimes you need to be willing to not do anything on a turn. Just set up, take a turn with setup, and don't worry about attacking sometimes because that can put you in the best game position. So you need to have a bit of a patient mindset, I think. You need to work with the cards you have, right? Because especially your attack, you're putting most of your hand back into your deck, so you don't have a lot of pieces. Now, if you can't get your Chinchinos or your Inteleon pieces onto the board early enough, then you're in a lot of trouble because then you just have nothing and you're just top decking. And you need a lot of pieces every turn. You usually have to evolve a Malamar, attach an energy and such. But you also do have artillery, which doesn't, it gets used in this deck basically in like Rapid Strike Urshifu and not much else. And artillery is a very powerful card, right? Search for any Rapid Strike card you want, and you can using Rapid Strike energy here. You have the supporters, your Pokemon, so it's useful. You play scoop up net too, so you have that option of scooping up the artillery to get an extra 80 damage with the Remoraid and the artillery. And so you have those decisions as you work through the game.
yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's time to talk about deck building, as you mentioned it a bit
Yeah.
earlier. But obviously, you need Malamar, and then you need artillery, right? Those are the two lines that go in every Rapid Strike deck, in addition to probably Spiral Energy,
Hmm.
Karina's Focus, and that's about where the
Right.
list is set.
And psychic energy usually
Yeah,
plays two basic psychic energy,
yeah. But then
and
from there, it like diverged a lot, right?
it does. I think scoop up nets probably in pretty much every build the counts would vary. If you're playing the Inteleon engine, you probably want force nets because you have to keep scooping up your Drizziles to reuse them the next turn, plus the like your basic, your Sobbles, your are the Rapid Strike Sobble, and you may play the Rapid Strike Inteleon also to have some options with that. Obviously, you could play Manaphy's. Like deck number of counts of things are critical as always. Like, do you play two Remoraids or three Remoraids? Those are big. Do you play like Minccino build? Do you play a 3-3? I like a 3-3 Cinccino line. Do you want to try to get a 4-3, or do you want to try and be really tight with a 3-2 line for extra space? It's those decisions which really, make the deck work or not work. And I played with it enough to kind of get that sense.
Yeah, and your preferred build. Why do you think Chinchino is better than Inteleon?
Well, it's something I've told you at times. I don't think I've said it here on the podcast. I think often winning and losing games comes down to making the least mistakes. I know I make mistakes. You've probably made at least one mistake in all
Yeah,
the games
from
you've
time to
played.
time, I may I'd say every like few months I'll make a mistake or something.
Yeah, you're the exception that almost never makes mistakes. But even top players at tournaments, at events over a weekend, they make multiple mistakes. There's not, I don't, there's not, there's very few games without a mistake. There's obviously decisions that could go either way, but often mistakes get made. So less mistakes is more wins. Less decisions means less mistakes, and Chinchino is less decisions. You like with Chinchino, it's just do I make do before the supporter or after the supporter? That's often the big decision you're making, I gotta say. And I know that's you don't like that. You want more decisions and more complexity, and that can be fun too, but it leads to less consistency, I think. More decisions. So,
Yeah, I guess. Obviously, I like the Inteleon build more.
hmm
There are really two. There's a third one I'm going to talk about that I actually
yeah,
think might be better than those. But Inteleon, one you're the Sobble and the one Inteleon, which you may or may not play, the Chilling Reign Inteleon. They're
right.
both rapid strike cards, which is good, right? You want to be playing lots of
hmm
rapid strike cards. When I played Malamar Cinccino, I like Malamar, and then I like draw all these, or I Cinccino and Carina's Focus and Bruno and all that, and draw a bunch of cards. And then I look at my hand, and I've got all these Cincinos and Mincinos in my hand that can't do damage and aren't helping me. And then I lose. And I don't like that feeling. I feel
hmm
like also sometimes losing the resources is kind of like it feels kind of bad to lose some of the resources in your deck when you're a single prize deck that's relying on needing so much stuff, notably all the
hmm
energies and Pokemon to attack with. And then also, I think it doesn't it doesn't allow for a really massive power push on the later turns, unlike or in the earlier turns as well. Unlike the Italian engine with the Drizzles, which allow you to do big power pushes and also big consistency increases, where you can go ahead and search out things like well, I was gonna say Battle VIP Pass. You can't search that out with Drizzle though, or at least not turn one.
not a turn one when you need it. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can search out anything really, and even with like Fog Crystal, you can search out your energies and your, of course, your Pokemon with Ball Search, and then your
hmm
supporters, which are really important. And so they're like artillery. And you can use multiple per turn, so they give you that boost. And overall, they like Cinccino, you can draw into all these cards and still not see what you need. But with Drizzle and Teleon, you're guaranteed to get what you need. And then also, I think they obviously synergize better with Scoop Up Net, which I really like. And
hmm
then you get the nice buff of being able to play Irida now, which provides a lot of value in Inteleon decks where you're not looking to play another supporter. And so, obviously, in Malamar, you kind of want to play another supporter, something like Cynthia's Ambition, Bruno,
hmm
Karina's. But I think Inteleon Edge opens up to more options, and I think it opens up to more powerful turns, especially in the early game, which is the most important part of the game.
Yeah, look, Inteleon gets going faster. I mean, I think that's for sure. What I don't like about it, though, is the strength of the deck actually diminishes as the game goes on because, like, the nets you said are so important, but you can never recover those. So eventually, if you can't scoop up your Drizzile, you're losing engine, you're losing draw. So I think it's a deck that starts strong and weakens, whereas Chinchino's, it builds over time. And I like that feeling better. It's a single prize deck. I can fall behind and things. I'm okay with that, and I like having the comeback ability. So that's part of it. And the Chino build is you takes less pieces, right? You need less Pokemon. You don't need the nets also as many nets necessarily. So you have room for more of a trainer mix, which I like that with the deck too. I mean, with Chinchinos, I look at my list. I play like Great Ball in that. So which again is another
Bad.
very random card that you don't like, but it actually you can't play. To me, I don't want to put in a quick ball or anything that discards because I don't want to do that. So great ball actually works within the deck, and you're usually getting a good piece. And the other thing with this deck is you're recovering pieces and what you recover and when with Rod and with Rescue Carry is a big piece of the deck too. So that's a very important strategic element as the game goes on. When do you use your Rescue Carrier to get what pieces? Those decisions get you the extra damage or get you set up for the next turn, which is important. So
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's time that I share my story with
yeah.
Malamar. I obviously don't like Malamar, and I haven't played it that much. So when
hmm
I do play it, I usually net deck, as is very common when you aren't as experienced with the deck,
Yep.
and just want to try it out for the first time. So I went over to Limitless, or played out Limitless, looked at the top deck, which is really like that's where you go for your list too, right?
Oh yeah, it's a good thing to do. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, and if you want to like improve and like see some ideas, usually there's nothing too crazy there, but there's
Yep.
just like if you want like a solid list, just go to play.limitless, and there are a ton. There are like thousands of lists. So I went to the highest, the top list. I clicked on Malamar, Upstrike
Hmm.
Malamar, looked at the highest list, and this must have been. This was probably when Palkia just came out, so it was like Astral Radiance. And
Okay.
so I looked at the top list, and I was like, obviously there's some new cards added, and so I looked, and it was a Chinchino list. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll try this. But then it also had Irida, so that's an interesting inclusion, which searches for water Pokemon, but it didn't have the Inteleon engine. So I took the list, and it didn't do too well because Irida is pretty bad without Inteleon, and so you'd like Chinchino, and then you draw into your Iridas, and you just kind
Yeah.
of lose. So yeah, I don't. And that was like the best Malamar deck there was. So yeah, I've never had a good experience with Malamar.
Yeah. I mean, it. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously randomness with the deck, so you have to play it enough to get past the randomness. And different decks do suit different styles. So I found it to be enjoyable. I think in some sense it's a cheeky deck. It's a very it's a single prizer. Stage one, as you said, it's not ideal, but potentially you do get those turns now and then with big damage. And for me, those occasional turns with big damage, I get a lot of enjoyment from those. So maybe that just it lifts my enjoyment level beyond probably with the performance of the deck.
Yeah, it's like
I
you're 10 games in, you're like, yes, I gotta win.
exactly. Yeah, the deck wins okay. But it was funny because we were, preparing for this discussion. I went on to Limitless and took a look at the current lists, and it's not played a lot, unsurprisingly, on online tournaments in Crowns in the new format. But it's played a few times. There's four decks that actually have a winning one more than their loss in the tournament. So each one of those, I think, only one game more than their loss. So it not overpowering. But the lists were almost the same as the old list. What they had two Inteleon builds, two Chinchino builds, but almost the decks had almost not developed at all. It's like time stood still for them from like 6 months ago.
Yeah, but as I said, I think there's a new build of Malamar that actually
Yeah.
is pretty good. I haven't actually tried this out, but it's with the new Curlia, which came out in wait, when did that come out? Did that come out in Silver Tempest? Yeah. So the Curlia, which is the same as Chinchino, except it's a well, it does have a bit less health and a debatably a worse, well, definitely a worse attack. But you can go ahead and search out the basic Ralts with your
Hmm.
copies of Fog Crystal, which is usually included in Malamar, and so I think that's like a nice buff to it. And you can
Yep.
also use the Glade from what's it? I think it's Astral Radiance that allows you to search for a supporter every turn, which isn't bad. You could even use the Gardevoir, which allows you to draw cards without needing to discard, which is better, obviously. So, what do you think of
Hmm.
that?
I think that's an interesting idea. I think I might want to try it because, as you mentioned, Fog Crystal is a very important card for it and a very useful card, a very powerful card. So trying to build and take advantage of that with it, I think I want to give that a try.
Do you think it would be better than the other builds?
Um, I'm not sure what the count will be, and if the more I see that the difficulty is what count am I going to use? Because compares the Cinchino build, which is like a 3/3 Cinchino. So now I'm probably want more than six within this line, I would think. So
Yeah.
then it's what am I cutting and how does that work out? That's I'm not sure that it's an interesting question.
Yeah. Do you have anything else? Honestly, I think that's all I have for Malamar. Do you have anything else?
Uh, no, I mean I think Malamar fits under the reasonably effective banner pretty well. It certainly had its day in the sun. It could win. It could even get lucky at a major IRL event and do decently. But it's just it's an okay deck that if you enjoy, play it, and if you don't, you have got a lot of other options there.
Yeah. I guess one other thing I mentioned this earlier, but there was I said the Passimian. Do you know that Passimian?
Yeah, the rapid strike one that boosts. It can do replace 20 damage counters if I remember.
Well, 20 does 20 damage.
It does 20 damage to any Pokemon. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then if its ability, right, boost
Boost damage
damage
to the bench, and it's a
benched,
Rapid Strike card.
yeah, benched full box, I think. So
Yes.
essentially, you could stick one of your what are they, spiral energies on it,
Right.
and then you can be hitting for a 50 snipe instead of playing boss's orders. You have the sniping capability, but do you think that's like ever worth it or not really?
Have tried it, I think, at times, but I've taken it out. The biggest value it has, it's a Rapid Strike card, and you just toss it back into the deck when you attack. It does give the option of knocking something out if you come up short and they retreat to the bench, but my experience with it is it didn't actually work often enough to make it worth the deck space.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then, like, I do think you should probably run boss orders, or at the very least, you probably need to run escape rope because Malamar has a big retreat cost
Mhm.
and stuff, and kind of go wrong there. But like,
Yeah.
you don't run boss? Do you run rope?
I I in my Cinchino build, I don't have any switch other than I have the stadium
Yeah, yeah,
Tower Water. So in that one, I think I run
yeah,
three in that one. So I run more in the Inteleon build, which only has one Tower Waters. I run rope in that,
yeah.
which
And
switches for
you
me.
run that in those as well.
Yeah, and obviously since the Inteleon, the Drizziles can pull that out when needed, so it makes a lot more sense. It's definitely included in the Inteleon engine, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for from
Yep.
Malamar, and I'm glad to be done with that. Now to move on to in my opinion, some better design cards. The tag team GXs that have rotated a little some months ago, but still a fond place in my heart, and I think in yours as well.
Yeah, I mean, we both started when they were out, kind of right before Sword and Shield came. Kind of late Sun and Moon is when we both kind of started playing in
No, we
that first.
started when Sword and Shield was out,
Okay,
or you guys started more seriously when Sword and
more
Shield was out.
serious. So we started a little, I think, a little bit before, and then got serious that first year with Sword and Shield. But obviously, the tag teams were a big part of things still.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start with the at the very beginning with the first tag team GX and the reveal of the mechanic with Pikachu and Zekrom, which is probably it's not too badly designed, but when people saw it, they were like, "Wow, this is absurdly overpowered." I remember PTCG Radio making a video on this, which is actually pretty funny, covering this card as it got revealed at Worlds. It was like a big thing,
Mhm.
saying, and if you don't know him, he's like a news Pokemon TCG channel, but he was saying this card's so good. This is like the kind of card that your friend makes a custom card and shows it to you, and you're like, this is really cool, but it can't ever be in the game because it's too overpowered. And he said that's what this looked like. So what it does, its first attack, its attacks are somewhat expensive, but there were a number of options to allow you to help pay it. Its first attack accelerated lightning energy and hit a solid damage output, 150 for 3. Also had a massive 240 HP, which now I'm looking at and it doesn't seem that massive. But then
Right,
also
but
its GX attack did 200 for 3, very big, and then or big back then. And then if
yep.
this Pokemon has 3 extra energy, so 6 energy, it does 200 plus a 170 snipe to one of your opponent's bench, which isn't that hard to pay off if you've used your first attack.
Right. Yeah. Wait, what was that Pokemon again? That was
Pikachu and Zekrom.
Zekrom, Pikarom, right? Which stayed as a good, a quality card for a while, right?
Yeah,
Pikarom,
it was probably good till it rotated.
which is surprising, especially because it's 240 HP, which, as you said, was considered big at the time. But by the time it was getting near the end, 240 HP for 3 was ridiculously low in HP.
Yeah, it's
You
like
know,
it's 100 HP less than Eternatus, which is also 3 prizes. So that's just crazy.
right? And it's just barely more than like Zacian and Zamazenta, but
Yeah.
giving up an extra prize. So it made it, but it was still successful. Now I never actually played Pikarom because I just, from my standpoint, it was too expensive to get. But you played it some, right?
I played it a little. I certainly I got it. So I've never been a big fan of this card. Not in the way it's designed. I think its design's pretty solid. But I never looked at it as particularly strong. In fact, I believe I've said on numerous occasions to you, it auto loses every matchup. So,
Right. While it
which
was going on to win event after event at the same time.
yes, yes. So, as I said, its stats looked low, but at the time, as I said, they're big. They were bigger than the Stage 2 GXs, which is just crazy. Like, they
Mm,
required so much work, and then Pikarom just is better than them as a basic. Sure, giving up one
yeah.
more prize is bad, but for being a stronger than a Stage 2, that's very good. But when you look at some later ones, it trades badly and in prizes, and then with the V's and V Maxes, it trades pretty badly. Its damage output isn't that high, and it was a bit weird of a deck. It revolved around
Mm,
specifically we both played with tag team being the oldest set in the format. So this was
yeah.
after that rotation. So this was when stuff like Thunder Mountain and Electro Power and Volkner wasn't that good, but when those types of cards had rotated, so Pikarom
Hmm.
just wasn't able to hit as high of a value. With Electro Power, Thunder Mountain, Pikarom looked really strong, but without them, it just seemed a bit to become a bit short. It really came down to a number of control aspects, including
Yeah.
what is not my favorite card, Crushing Hammer, was a very important part of this deck.
Yeah, and I think reset stamp too, right? If I recall, it was one of those decks that would try to get you'd have to take on 5 prizes and then have to finish off a Pika Rom, so essentially draw out 8 prizes. But they could reset you stamp down to 1 card in hand, so it gave a good comeback mechanic.
Yeah, Reset Stamp was played in that deck. A lot of Marnies were played in that deck. One of the
Hmm.
I think a world's winning deck was Pikarom Judge, which is like Pikarom with Judge to disrupt. So it's always been focused around disruption because it actually hasn't been able to stand up to quite the power level. There are a few other. Obviously, this is the first one we're talking about, so it's like very it's hard to judge in a vacuum. There are a number of
Hmm.
other, notably Raichu and Alolan Raichu. I guess we can talk about that now. That came out in Unified Minds, I believe. So 2 sets later, nice buff with the addition
Well,
of.
do you want to talk about Gengar and Mimikyu? Do
I
you
think
want to
we'll talk about
you want to
this.
save that?
Yeah, we'll talk about realistically Raichu and Alolan Raichu only stands alongside the Pikarom. It came out in 2 later sets, but
Okay.
um, it helped with the disruption aspect of Pikarom as well as Bolt on V was a very important part of that being your engine, and that was one of the few decks that hadn't okay, it wasn't one of the few decks that hadn't a setup attack, but it was one of the few decks that had a setup attack that wasn't game breaking. I'll say so. Yeah,
Yeah, Raichu and Alolan Raichu. So 260 HP, tandem shock 80. If it swings into the active, another 80, and they're paralyzed. I mean, that's not big damage for 3 energy on such a 3 prize Pokemon.
yeah, but the paralysis is really big, and that's where the reset Sam crushing hammers. All of a sudden, you've like lost all your energy, all your cards, and you're paralyzed, and then that's how they'd win. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but as you said, the damage output's relatively low. Its GX attack's pretty bad as well. You wouldn't really use it too often. You'd use it some because it's okay. It's good damage output, I guess, but it's not that good.
Yeah.
And then also Bolt on V could get to big damage, but really Pikarom was the star of the show. But it set the
Yeah.
scene for some very powerful Pokemon. And as I said, they've only gotten more powerful from here. But do you want to talk about Gengar Mimikyu?
Yeah, I'll mention that. But then you're the one that played it
Yeah.
more. It's a psychic Pokemon, and its GX attack probably is what I remember it for. Horror House, um, for 1 energy, your opponent can't play any cards from hand the next turn. So essentially, your opponent can't do anything. It is, and if they're not already set up to hit into you, they're doing nothing. So you kind of get two back-to-back turns to get things going. For a second energy, then you could each player draw till you have 7, but that wasn't necessarily something that you wanted to do. Um, and then the attack was okay, but it was often used in other decks, right?
Yeah. So I played. Yeah, we'll get to that later, but I guess I'll talk about one of the powerful pairings of this. A bit traumatic for some players, certainly myself included. for the reason I think that I did not make top or excuse me, part of the reason I did not make top cut, I believe, of Players Cup. Um, and I'll show you the other card. Gengar Mimikyu was very good.
Hmm.
And then another, I'd say, arguably the most problematic tag team, and highlights one of the flaws of Pokemon's design. Unfortunately, Trevenant and Dusknoir GX. So this one, more health, but for 3 Psychic, choose 2 random cards in your opponent's hand, and then they shuffle them into the deck, but you also do 150 damage, so pretty solid damage output. And then Amazing Disruption. That's an okay GX stack, but not that good. And then really you'd use what's it called? You'd use Gengar Mimikyu to set up, and then Trevenant
Yeah.
and Dusknoir to just keep hitting into them, and then you'd Marnie, Trevenant, and Dusknoir, Marnie, Trevenant, and Dusknoir, so they'd have like almost no cards to work with every turn, and essentially
Yeah.
not be able to play the game at all. I lost like one of my rounds in the Pog Championship due to
Hmm.
that because I didn't wasn't able to play any cards pretty much all game. And also at the time of these coming out, Malamar, the other Malamar, the psychic one from Forbidden
Hmm.
Light, Accelerating Energy, allowed this to be set up better. That was a solid deck, I guess. And another iconically underwhelming Malamar, I guess. And not bad, but not living up to expectations. And
Yeah.
then this was just super annoying. But the big problem I highlight that I don't like about it that persists is that it's a promo exclusive, so it's super expensive and
Mm.
pretty unobtainable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it is a promo only, so it's very difficult to get. I know you're not a fan of live. I think live will make access to cards like this easier though, because it's just going to be based on rarity, so it's not supply demand. So a card like this becomes more obtainable, which is a plus.
Yeah, have you played against this on the expanded ladder in live?
I've avoided the expanded ladder on live as I think we all should be it now. I mean, these cards though, it just made playing against these decks to me was always a very unpleasant experience. So
Yeah, they're as I said, traumatic of it for me. They're not enjoyable and um, very obnoxious, very straightforward as well. One of the problems of the
mhm.
tag teams that people said about tag teams and VMAXs, not just the 3 prizes, but also the fact that they're just super generic, not generic, but boring. Just hit, 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 and then game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some exceptions to that we'll see, but yeah, that was true for a lot of things
Yeah, and
with it.
all of them were just kind of. I was gonna say they're always just attacking, but that's kind of true of Pokemon as a whole. You're attacking. It's an attacking game, but yeah, a few people criticize them for being boring, and in some sense they were. But what's the next one? Do you want to talk about here?
All right, looking through as I'm scrolling through the order, so I didn't quite.
There are a few here you played. There's Reshazard. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I'm looking through. That's the next one to hit, right? Chronologically. So Reshazard, obviously, Welder was a big thing at that point when, like, the early days of Sword and Shield, Welder was still around. Attach up to 2 energy from hand to a bench Pokemon, draw 3 cards, a super powerful
To
card.
any Pokemon,
To any
actually,
Pokemon, I'm sorry, you're right.
even better.
Basic fire energy to any. Oh, that's right. It didn't have to be just the benched,
Yep.
right? So even better. And probably a bit of an overpowered card, which is why I don't think they're going to do that card again. But and a deck that Welder, of course, was very inconsistent. But this with Reshazard and maybe a few other pieces, you could just run over your opponents, especially if you went second and were able to set up with it. You would you have the GX attack double blaze for 3 energy. It does 200 damage. And so if you had the energy in the welder turn one, you got your 3 energy, do 200 damage at 270 HP. You're not getting knocked out. You attach an energy the next turn. Now you're doing 230 for flare strike. Or if they attack into you and the numbers work out right, you could outrage, which is 30 plus 10 per damage counter. So, but now you're doing 200 turn one, 230 turn two, and your opponent's just kind of crying because they have no chance at that point.
Yeah, and
Uh,
in fact, we neither of us really played during this time, but before Sword and Shield came out, the rulings
Mhm.
were slightly different. You could play a supporter turn one, so you'd
Mhm.
Welder turn one going first, Welder turn two going first, and turn two you're hitting going first. So essentially, your opponent doesn't have a chance to evolve. They haven't had a chance to do much of anything, and all of a sudden you're
Yep.
hitting 300 damage, and your opponent just like conceding. So that wasn't actually that good. You wouldn't necessarily need to do 300 before your opponents had a chance to do anything, much of anything. But yeah, it's amazingly powerful. You played in some toolbox decks as well, Welder toolbox, right?
Right. Yeah. Welder. You could maybe have Blacephalon as a single prize attacker. Some other options. Cramorant V hitting was it was 160 to any Pokemon, right, for three
Yep.
energy.
Hmm.
Could take advantage of Welder. So, yeah, it was nice. It lent itself to some different boxes. Welder though was always inconsistent. So it was when it worked, it was great. Sometimes it just you wouldn't get the energies in hand to do the damage you need. Um, but 270 HP, a very strong number there, and doing 200, 230 damage, and it was huge. The other tag team you could pair it with, I'll mention, is Charizard and Braixen. That's an okay one. You might pair that in as a second tag team sometimes.
Yeah. One other thing to say about Reshazard, this
Hmm.
embodies, in my eyes, I'm not sure if I call this power creep, but the fact that it's better than Pikarom, and why I said Pikarom loses
Hmm.
every matchup, auto loses every matchup. Flare Strike, it doesn't quite one shot Pikarom or stuff like Gengar Mimikyu, but with like you just need 10 more, which you can get in a number of ways. The decks that played Reshazard certainly had many ways of doing that. Galarian Zigzagoon was
Yep.
probably the most common way, and then you could also do Vitality Band, but at that point you're just like essentially one-shotting these three prize Pokemon, which is something people did not like at all because they're like the game lasted 3 turns and I haven't like done anything and now I've lost. So people understandably didn't like that. I personally, I like I either like really slow decks or really fast decks.
Hmm.
And when I say really slow, I mean like 100-turn games, but fast like I want to play like if the game goes longer than 5 turns or less than 50, I'm not happy.
Yeah, I mean the nice things about this is it did lend itself to a toolbox like called kind of Tempo Zard, where we have bunch of different pieces you can do. So that's useful, interesting. And then the other build to Reshazard, where it would typically use Jirachi to help draw and get you the pieces you need. You leave out Jirachi, then you make it a greens deck, a greens exploration, where you search for two cards, correct, with greens from your deck, as long as
Trainers,
you
2 trainers.
two trainers, any two trainers. Yeah, sorry. As long as you have no Pokemon with abilities in play. So that was kind of the other way to play some of these fire cards.
Yeah, and also fire type was realistically the undisputed like best type of
Hmm.
this like year. There was Charizard was the best fire Pokemon other than debatably the Baby Blacephalon, but in
Yep.
Volcanion. But I say this is better. In addition to Welder and then Fire Crystal, what was it? The Stadium Giant Hearth, yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so really, you just have this amazing package. We just like run through stuff, mostly Welder and Reshazard, but
Yep.
yeah, Fire was absurdly good, and I think like the undisputed goat of that year in terms of power. And then the worlds, I think like the worlds deck list that they showed, 3 of the 4 deck lists were Welder decks, which is pretty absurd.
Yeah. Had the best Pokemon and the best trainers. I think really it was loaded.
Yeah, but another one I imagine you want to talk about is Luke Metal, right?
Yeah, that was a deck I enjoyed playing. Yeah, Lucarian Melmetal, 260 HP, not as big as Reshazard, but it had the full metal wall. Its GX attack, which if you had two energy, which could be, I believe, of any type,
Yep.
your metal Pokemon take 30 less damage. That was just for one energy, but then with the second energy, which you usually want to take advantage of this, your opponent would discard all energy from their active Pokemon. So you're now taking 30 less damage, and your opponent just lost all their energy. So, because you'd wait till they had the active Pokemon with the energy that you would set them back a couple turns with it. You're not taking damage. You had like metal goggles to reduce damage, and such. So you had a number of pieces to make it happen. So this was a slow wall deck, and it worked well within that. And this, as a metal Pokemon, then when we were playing, Zacian and Zamazenta are out. So Zacian a big attacker, Zamazenta a little bit wally, and so you had these pieces with Metal Saucer and stuff to make a deck work. And we had the Lily's Pokédoll, right, which was an item, right? When you played it, it went onto your bench, and if your opponent knocked it out, they took no prizes, but also you could remove it from play, right, and go back in your deck. So it gave free switching also if it was in your active. So it was some nice pieces to work with.
Yeah, I think this is a deck I didn't play as much as you, but it was a very fun deck. Pretty slow one. You could play it with the
Yep.
tag call engine as well, right?
Yeah, I liked it for that. The tag call, which searched for two tag team cards, and then you had the tag team supporters that were pretty good. But since you could get them with tag call, you could choose which two cards you needed at a given time and kind of get things set up pretty well. Get a
Yeah.
stadium and such energies and such.
Yeah, so I'd say a pretty cool card. Speaking of the tag call engine, it didn't see too much play, but actually at the very end of its life, so in terms of the tag team cards, we're
Hmm.
talking about this the Pokemon, but the supporters there's well, okay, so there was I believe six of them, but technically seven. Um, so the big three there was Guzman Hala, which was good at search for support
Hmm.
special energy stadium. Sorry, special energy stadium tool. Not anything amazing, but it was good in some decks. Then we also
Yep.
saw Cynthia Caitlyn. Do you know which one it was?
Cynthia and Caitlin are yeah, or Sinlin for short.
Okay. So that would allow you to draw some cards and then also recover support is pretty solid, especially in a slower deck.
Yep.
Not the strongest, but not bad. And then we also saw Malamar, a really nice healing and switching card, which is quite frankly amazing. That was great in Luke Metal, right?
Right, Luke Metal being very tanky, your opponents can't one shot your healing off. They'd start to do damage, and then you'd use Malo and Lana, and you'd heal off 120 when you switched. So it was just again it worked. It fit together pretty well as a set.
Yeah, and then there were three other ones. I think there were red and blue, which were bad. There were
Yeah, red and blue, Misty and Lorelei,
yeah, that one
which
was
I'm not.
also bad. And then what was the last? Oh,
Uh,
and then yes, the classic, which is the controversial one, I should say. Um, Balola and Bryson Man, a
yeah.
debatably very powerful milling card that got banned. So it was one of the first cards banned in a long time, and it wasn't even like that good. I wouldn't say it was the best card in the format. Was it good? I don't know. It allowed you some bench disruption. People, I
Hmm.
like somewhat of a conspiracy theory that it was banned. Well, it was banned around the time Eternus VMAX came out, right before that, and it hard
Hmm.
counted Eternus VMAX, and people were like, Pokemon wants to make their big expensive new card really good, so they're gonna ban the counter to it. Was that true? Probably not, but it was banned. So
Yeah.
out of the six, which isn't a lot, two of them were hot trash. Three of them were pretty solid but situational, and one was banned.
Hmm.
So we got a replacement a few months, maybe like a month before it rotated, which was kind of strange, meaning that we got this card for a very short period of time. But a
Hmm.
replacement to Blob and Bryson, man, we got Sabrina and Bryson, which was completely different. Which
Yeah,
was
not even related, which was strange.
yeah, and also a promo exclusive. It was just all around strange, but it was really crazy. I searched for like three Pokemon of different types and like two energies of different types. Was it something like
Yeah,
that?
search your deck for two basic energy cards was the first one, and then with these supporters, you always had an option. With this one, you had to discard five cards, which was a heavy price to pay, and then you search for up to three Pokemon of different types. So, a strange thing. There's not many decks that are going to want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, but the one deck that did was this dark box style deck focused on I guess Greninja and Zoroark GX, which just wanted to flood the board with dark energy.
Hmm.
One notable thing is that obviously the tag teams aren't in standard anymore, but they are very good in expanded. because they're just some of the best cards we've ever seen. Very strong basics. And Greninja
Yep.
Zoroark is one of the best, right? So it's an interesting one. Not too much to note, but I think it deserves a mention.
Yeah, yeah, it's a useful card, and it's one you played a little bit, right?
Um,
Or not really?
yeah, I played. Okay, so everyone knows Lugia V Star, I'm assuming, where you use your V Star power to set up your Lugias. So there was a similar deck. So Greninja Zorax GX attack is somewhat similar, and it puts Dark Pokemon onto your bench. So you'd put Incineroar GX, the build I played, which was bad, by the way. I wouldn't really recommend this, but it certainly is, I'd say, a video deck one that's kind of funny.
Hmm.
Not horrible, kind of high rolly, but you put two Incineroar GXs onto your bench that accelerate Dark Energy to themselves, and then because your attack is based off of Dark Energy attached to all your Pokemon, all of a sudden you're just hitting the next turn. You're hitting like I got locked out of Pokemon as
I've been
we've been chatting
talking
for a
too
while.
long.
Yeah, but you'd be hitting like 120 extra damage the next turn, which is just absurd. But
Yeah,
overall, that was kind of bad.
yeah. I mean, you talked me into trying that deck, and as I call it, when you say somewhat high rolly, I think that's a gross under exaggeration. It was super high rolly, but when it worked, you just obliterated your opponent. So it was kind of fun for that, like every fifth game or something when it worked. It was fun
Yeah, I
type
think it
thing.
involved an energy switch clear and Moltres play at turn one. So yeah, that was not amazing.
Yeah.
But it was fun. But then I think there's another one from this set. This set was very good. Probably one of my favorite sets of all time. Really, all the tag teams in here were pretty solid. But then Gardevoir and Sylveon GX, Tag Team GX. This saw play at before like that rotation.
Hmm.
It's really the last stand for Fairy. There weren't many Fairy cards printed this year, but this one was the best. It suffered greatly when Metal became really good with Zacian V, which we'll talk
Yep.
about a bit more. As you said, Luke Metal though played that. That was bad for Guardian. But it was a solid Fairy deck and a Greens Exploration
Yep.
deck as well.
Yeah. It's not one I have played, but I know it was certainly one of the few good fairy options that were around back then. So
Yeah, so now we got the next set, Unified Minds, and we're taking a bit of a slow road, but this is a nice. I think it's a nice walkthrough of remembering the history of the tag
back
teams, which
in
are
the
pretty
old
fun.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we're Pokemon boomers now, so um,
Even you are now too, huh?
yes, I am. But I'm gonna look at this set, which has there are a few. This was not overall as influential. We see that Raichu and Alolan Raichu, which we mentioned earlier with Pikaram, it was a helper to that, which was solid. We also see Umbreon and Darkrai, and then with Mega Sableye and Tyranitar, which are a big part of. Well, Umbreon and Darkrai was a big part of that. Sabrina and
Mm.
Bryson, Dark Box with all that like weird stuff in it. And then we also see Giratina and Garchomp, a tech card sometimes played. Um, but Rowlet Executor here was just amazing.
Hmm.
As well, okay, and expanded is kind of overpowered and not fun because it's like it stops you from doing anything with the Vileplumes. But in standard, you play it with Rillaboom and you'd have a fun little deck. Did you ever play that or not?
No, I didn't really play that one. So, um,
Yeah, it looked fun though. Where you do you know how that deck worked?
no, I really don't. I gotta say.
Okay, so Rowlet and Lone Executor has, I think, in my opinion, a better take on Lugia V-Star's V-Star power because it actually encourages one, some versatility, but two, it's just more interesting for a free attack, which is interesting. A searcher deck, pretty much you take a grass Pokemon or a
Hmm.
Pokemon on your bench, evolve it. That's grass, fully evolve it. But you search your deck for the stage one, stage two, and put it onto
Yeah.
that. And so you get Rillaboom. You accelerate to your Rowlet and Lone Executor or some other attackers with Rillaboom. You played Delmise. You've played Delmise. Did you ever put this in or not? Did you never like have this with
No, I
Delmise?
never had this, and by the time I was playing Rillaboom and Delmise, I don't. This had rotated
Okay.
from standard.
Yeah. But this was solid. Also, its GX attack. Wow, this was insane. Tropical Arrow GX 300
Hmm.
200 for 3, pretty common in most of these.
Yeah.
But then if you have the extra 3 energy, again very common. But your opponent shuffles all energy attached to all their Pokemon into their deck. So this was
Yeah.
just like a stronger version of Luke Metal's attack that was super disruptive,
Hmm.
notably against Pikachu and Zekrom. That's why I say like Pikachu and Zekrom loses to everything. You use your attack with Pikachu and Zekrom, and they shuffle all your energy back into your deck, and then you lose. So, but yeah, it was pretty good, but not too amazing. And also, as we said, Fire was so good. So Rowling and Executor just drowning out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of games where it was kind of this game of standoff of who would time the GX attacks, right? Because these GX attacks like this are so disruptive, right? You had to time it just right, but your opponent knows what you're trying to do. So that was kind of, to the extent the games were interesting, I think that was part of what made them interesting.
Yeah, and then also Slowpoke, and Psyduck was a funny, one of the funniest tag teams, probably the funniest, kind of bad, not horrible. And
Yeah.
then we saw Espeon Deoxys, but this actually, would you believe it, won the World Championship in 2019. But that is thanks to the great, in my opinion, one of the best cards of all time, and certainly one of the most fun cards of all time, a Mewtwo and Mew GX with no normal attacks. It has
Yeah.
a GX attack that does, again, 200 for 3. Then if you have an extra energy, you heal all damage from all your Pokemon. Is that good? Yeah, it's not bad. Would you use it, though? No, because
Probably not, right?
yeah, it has the ability Perfection, which they have never gotten an ability name more right. This one
Yeah.
allows you to copy any GXs or EXs from your bench or your discard pile. This means, notably, you can copy any stage 2 EX or stage 1 EX. You don't need to evolve it. And
Right.
then you can just copy. You need their energy, but it was so much fun. And you played this too, right?
I did. I did play it a little bit, not as much as you did, and it is fun. It's having those options is great. And like you said, any of the evolving GXs, you just had to get it in the discard, and you were good to go with it. The current Mew VMAX kind of is like this, except you have so many more options with this GX that it's just much more interesting to play, I think.
Yeah, and in my opinion, we've seen a lot of them used with abilities that allow you to copy attacks. This is I want to say this is the best designed. There's the really old Mew, which was super good. I have no idea how good it was. I think it was like blatantly overpowered, if I remember. And there's a newer one that was a bit less overpowered, but I don't know. I think that was a lot. A lot of the older ones I don't really know too much about, and they're during in my opinion, the dark age of Pokemon, where all the rulings are weird, and it was a much
Yeah.
smaller game. Doesn't mean they were badly designed, but I generally focus on Black and White on, and certainly this is an amazing rendition of the toolbox style deck. So you'd have Mewtwo Mew. Notably, one of the best ones, as I said, Welder was super dominant. That's what
Hmm.
actually won the World Championships this year with Mewtwo and Mew. So you'd have Mewtwo and Mew. As I said, Espeon and Deoxys was in that deck, as well as Reshiram and Charizard, as well as Heatran GX, as well as just so many different Pokemon that were all
Hmm.
really strong. You could play this in so many different builds. I've been talking about all these different Pokemon. Pretty much all these tag teams saw play in Toolbox Mewtwo and Mew decks because it was so good. There was a Pikachu and Zekrom Mewtwo and Mew deck. There was Grass Mewtwo and Mew deck. There's the Dark
Yep.
deck that I kept referring to was a Mewtwo and Mew deck. Really, if you want to play something, if you want to just have fun, play a really cool deck, play Mewtwo and Mew. It would be so strong. It had a few weaknesses, notably its actual weakness, Psychic type, but that could be countered because you had Jirachi GX, and then also
Hmm.
you had the other weakness of having the ability turned off, which is really bad for you because, as I said, you don't have any regular attacks, but that can be turned off by either Path to the Peak or Power Plant. But
Yep.
overall, it was just so fun, and it could escape those counters. This is a Pokemon that works really nicely with counters.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty good design deck card. Part of why I think it works is it takes the energy of the attack you're copying. So you had to have a focus with the deck of what by energy type. Like, are you going to use fire with welder? Are you going to use grass? You can't just throw in all the different types because you probably weren't going to get the energy cost you needed.
Yeah, that's kind of true. There are a few different builds in expanded. Well, I guess I'll talk about standard first. The build
Mhm.
I played was Welder, and then you could put in
Yeah.
Aurora energy. So you could, if you just
Yeah.
had, say, Psychic Colorless, or like Water Colorless, or whatever that you're copying, you could pull
Hmm.
this off. You had a number of stage 2s Incineroar GX, which I mentioned earlier, being bad. It's not bad with its GX attack. If you're copying it with Mewtwo Mew, you'd be hitting like 1,000 damage, which is pretty crazy. Certainly better than Miraculous Duo. And then Vileplume GX coming in pretty good. There were some others that I don't really remember. But overall, it's insane. And then expanded, you have access to EXs as well, which honestly, most of them aren't that good. But you
Yeah.
also have access to more GXs, and then you have Electrode GX, as well as some others related to it, where you can accelerate like all the special energy to it. Like imagine if you had Mewtwo Mew GX with Archeops Lugia, that would be insane because you could be doing anything anytime.
Yeah, it was a very good card, and probably part of what makes the tag team something that one can think of fondly is maybe a card like this.
Yeah, this is my favorite card ever. I think it's hard. It's not my favorite deck ever, but it encouraged creativity in a way that I think only one other tag team did, which we'll get to later. Although I'm sure many people will disagree with me on that one. And then, but this one,
Yeah.
I think everyone loved. Certainly, some people didn't like the overall philosophy of Mewtwo Mew, but even they, if they played Mewtwo Mew some, they it's fun to play and definitely diverged from that idea that you're just doing the one attack over and over. It was
Mhm.
so unique. You could play it. Everyone could personalize it, and it wasn't hard to personalize either. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was expensive though. So, the whole getting the Mewtwo Mew GX was not easy in that regard though.
Well, most of them were all the good ones were expensive though.
Right. So that was the one difficulty. You just had to get the resources to get it, but then you had a lot of options. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you and I both. This was earlier when we were playing, so we had way less resources, notably like
That's
less
true.
tickets, less knowledge of how to trade. So I think we
Hmm.
struggled more to get it. But I think stuff like pretty much like Arceus, Lugia, Palkia, they're all like, about as difficult to get.
Yeah, I mean, once I think with PTCGO, you've been playing for a year, you've got the resources and the knowledge to access the decks and cards you're going to want to get probably. But first 6 months, things like this are just out of reach, I think.
Yeah, at least for the set.
Yeah, unless you of course want to just fork over a lot of money, which
A
we
lot of
don't
people,
want to do.
yeah, a lot of people do that. Not us though. So I think it's time to talk about the last set. Then there are only 4 years of
Hmm.
or 4 sets of tech teams, 1 year. I guess we'll talk
Yep.
about Venusaur and Snivy. Pretty underwhelming. Saw Niche play in some weird stuff. Um, that isn't really worth mentioning. Charizard and Braixen we mentioned earlier as a fire
Yep.
option. Blastoise and Piplup just pretty bad. We see the water ones here just being very weak. I think we skipped over another one. They're all kind of like silly. This is the least silly, but also probably the worst. Solgaleo and Lunala. Again, this is so insanely powerful. It's kind of like Reshizard. It can literally become invincible. In fact, it makes all your Pokemon invincible, and yet still didn't see any play. So that's the extent of the power level at this time. But
Yep.
yeah, that was pretty cool. The Baby Trio, one of the iconically bad ones, but with its Supreme Tough Puff GX attack, you take another turn. So,
Mhm.
what does this remind you of?
This is the Jigglypuff from Rapid Strike.
What?
Well, this is you take another turn.
Wait,
With
what? You mean
what are you
Meta?
saying? You're talking what's that back-to-back turns here? I
Yeah.
mean Jumpluff, or you're talking
No,
Dialga?
that's yeah, Dialga.
Okay, yeah,
With its GX, with its V Star attack, allowing you to take another turn. Except
yep.
this says one, it doesn't actually do any damage. So, just taking another turn isn't particularly good, especially with
Hmm.
Fairy. Fairies was pretty bad. And this card was pretty bad. But if this Pokemon has 16 Fairy energy, which is pretty absurd,
Yep.
um, like I when I say pretty absurd, this is like that's actually absurd. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do this to me, and I didn't play this ever because it was bad. But your opponent shuffles all their
Yeah.
bench Pokemon and attach them into their deck, so you'd destroy their whole bench. and then you would try to use Rolling Panic, which only does 120 damage. That's really bad. In
Yeah.
addition to, but if you KO them, you just win. If you didn't KO them, you probably just lose. And obviously, this is absurd to set up. But there was this funny setup where you use the was it the hat? No, it wasn't the hat trio. It was the something girls. I don't remember. There's these like four cards
Okay.
that you do this like absurd combination. I think you played like you had this crazy combo where you played like 9 supporters in one turn, and you need to get lucky. But it was pretty
Yeah.
funny. Do you know what they're called?
No, I don't. I mean, this
Okay.
is a card that you look at it, it's just made for content creators to make that video of that one game and like 50 games where it works, and you say, here it is.
Yeah, this one was funny. It's pretty bad, but that's fine. And
I,
then
I will ask you a question though, and I don't know if you know, but it says you skip the between turn step. So does that mean you don't draw or anything like that?
you draw. I'm
You do.
pretty
Okay.
sure. What's it say? I think that's the between turn, which I believe was renamed.
Does that mean you don't burn and
Yeah, I
poison if
think it
if they're
means
in
you don't
effect?
don't burn poison. Um, I don't. What's that?
That's fine.
I think it's the. I don't remember what it's called, but there's a term for it. But yeah, I believe it skips that.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
yeah, and then we saw what people thought was going to be the end of Pikarom, Megalopunny, and Jigglypuff, which was not the end of them. And then we also saw Nadeland Guzzlord, moderately interesting. Another Pokemon that
Hmm.
was really funny. It's a GX attack let you just like take prize cards, which is pretty absurd. Um, and then we got the two that I think are really noteworthy. One of these I'm sure you a common fossil have heard of, which is ADP, and then one of which you have not heard of
Yep.
as much, Reshiram and Zekrom.
Yes, both the dragon Pokemon, one being the iconic one, which you played a lot, and I didn't play
Yeah,
a lot.
but Reshiram and let's talk about Reshiram and Zekrom
Yeah,
first. What do you know about this card? Like, how much? What's your experience with this card?
my experience with this card is basically zero. So as I look at it, I see fire and lightning, and I'm kind of looking through it. Basically, didn't play it, and I honestly don't recall playing against it either.
Yeah, and that would be correct. I think that's most players' experience, especially if you weren't around for the when this card came out, which I was not either. But looking
Yeah.
back, this is quite possibly the biggest flop card ever. Well, I don't know if that's true, but looking at its attack here, it looks pretty solid. You see 270 HP, essentially no weakness as well, which is
Right.
we'll get to
Right. It
later.
was very weak, but there wasn't much fairy.
Yeah. And Fair was weak to metal as well, so that was pretty irrelevant. Um, but it's attack fabled flare bolts. And by the way, Reshiram and Zekrom are two of my favorite Pokemon, so this looks
Hmm.
awesome. Discard up to 3 in any combination of basic fire and basic lightning from your bench Pokemon. This does 90 for each card discarded. So discard 3, that's 270. That's
Yep.
amazing, right? No other tag teams really reached that, so that's amazing. Fire, lightning, attack. So if you want to do that, you need 3 on your bench, 2 on your active. That's clearly awkward. But keep in mind that fire and lightning were the two like best types, right? Yeah,
Right. You have Welder, and at 270 HP, it's probably not getting knocked out, and it doesn't lose its energy. So you have, if you can set it up, you can stream attacks with it too.
yeah, and you also have you had Tapu Koko Prism Star as well, right? Which is very good.
Right. Yep, to get some energy on too. Yes.
Yeah, so people were like, "This is insane," because it, like, notably Welder. Welder is just so good, and this
Yep.
just capitalized. It's not as absurd as being able to set Falana where you need like 10 fire energy, and then which was doable, right?
Hmm.
You'd hit those 10 energy turns, right?
Yep. I loved it. I enjoyed able to Cephalon. It was a lot of fun, and you could get those turns, which are fun.
Yeah, but this was more doable than that, especially with like a
Yep.
turn of setup. You could use all those things that you use to set up Pikarom or those things you set up Welder decks. You could combine them together or just use one or the other. You'd want to focus more on one. And then there's also supported
Hmm.
card Ends Resolve, which was oh, what did I think it discarded the top 6 cards of your deck and accelerated any energy there to your bench dragon Pokemon. I think it wasn't. Can you pull it up, or I can pull it up?
What was it? Ends.
Ends Resolve in Cosmic Eclipse. But it was a it didn't look great, but it didn't look horrible. Have you
Trying
found
to
it?
find. So I have not Cosmic Eclipse. You
I'll
said.
find it.
All right. Yeah. Sorry.
Um, but this is obviously
Okay.
this
End result. Discard the top
finally.
six of your deck. If any of those cards are basic energy, attach them to one of your benched dragon Pokemon.
Yeah, so that's obviously
So,
not amazing, but you had synergies with like Oranguru and stuff.
yeah.
So people were like, "This is going to be insane," and also it's GX tech, and so this is where we saw some of the interesting tag team GXs all attacks. All of them, right, they had an energy cost, and then you'd pay more to like do more, right?
Yes. Yep.
So this one did 170 to one of your opponent's Pokemon benched for Fire, Lightning. Not crazy to power up by any means. And if you played End Resolve
Right.
this turn, it does 170 snipe to two bench, which is insane. Like, this was so good. It's guaranteed four prizes when everyone was running, like, Dedenne GX in every deck. It just,
Right.
like, it just murders your opponent's side of the board, and it's so brutal. You can just like pretty much this deck look like it could KO anything anytime, which is
Hmm.
crazy. And people are hyping this up so much, and I'm hyping it up so much. And as you said, no one played it, or no one played it a few like a month after it came out because it
Right.
flopped so hard. It was so hype. It was hyped way more than any other card in the set. Probably way more hyped than any other card this year outside of maybe Pikarom being the first tag team. Um, but it was probably hyped more than that. This card, people thought was like it's gonna break the game. It didn't. It didn't break the game. So
N- No. And obviously the other card we're waiting on became the big card shortly after this.
yeah. So why don't you intro it? Because
All right.
you have a different take. Maybe a different take. You know my take though.
Yeah, it's a very, I think, divisive card. ADP, Arceus Dialga, and Palkia GX, the tag team with the altered creation attack. Right, as you should be familiar with, either from playing with it or playing against it. For the rest of the game, your Pokemon's attack do 30 more damage. That's if one energy, but if it has an additional water energy, then when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out from damage, you take one extra prize card. So you get this set up, and you would often just run over your opponent. Um, I was, as we had said, was a Luke Metal player, so there's kind of this interesting little battle between the two, if it would go that way. But I think this card with the GX Tech made single prizers almost unplayable for a long time because a single prizer works because you're not doing as much, but you have time. Now with this, three single prize cards being knocked out, and you lose the game. So that makes single prizers really in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think this card is, and it's mostly because of Alter Creation. It's regarded
Yeah.
as one of the best cards ever, if not the best card ever, at least
Hmm.
Pokemon. It's a bit subjective, or it's very subjective, but it certainly stands up there.
Yep.
Being able to just take extra prizes is insane. This is like one of those attacks that it like you look at and then you like look at it again and you're like, What is this? This is absurd."
Yep.
Honestly, people didn't think this card was going to be that good. I looked at a set review. Someone was like, so we're looking at this new set here, this insane Reshiram Zekrom, but then there's this like kind of other one, ADP, which doesn't look as good. But yeah, this was obviously very very good. I wasn't necessarily the best deck in the game. It was very close to that for pretty much the whole time I was out, though. I knew it
Yeah.
next to Pikachu and Zekrom, and it was paired with Zacian V, right? Another contention
Yeah, I
for
mean,
best
when
card
this
ever.
came out, Zacian didn't exist, so that was one of the factors why it wasn't as good. Once Zacian came out, which was in the very next set expansion, it just boosted this up so much.
Yeah. But at the same time, it didn't need Zacian. Zacian was nice. It helped with certain
Hmm.
matchups, but you
Yep.
had, I'd say the best partner would be Keldeo GX, which was also an insanely good card. It's like kind of meal tank in the sense that it walled off GXs, which was obviously very
Hmm.
good, and I think EXs. Um, and then it also had some like solid attacks and just really good partner. And then you could also
Hmm.
do the. Actually, never mind. But I was gonna say you can do like because with Zacian, you'd try to do Metal Saucer Energy Switch to attack with his turn
Right.
one. every player's
Yeah,
scariest thought.
I mean, you're right. You'd be on the ladder. You go as ADP. They would go second. Now, the nice thing is there are people that want to go first and second, which is nice. But honestly, you're against ADP. Your opponent pulls off Alter Creation turn one. The temptation to hit the concede button certainly was pretty strong because you were in a really tough spot at that point.
Yeah, honestly, if they went first, it was also bad because they'd be guaranteed essentially 80 Alter Creation turn two, and
Right.
that's good. They haven't won, but they're in a very favorable position. Now you need to pretty much after they alter creation, you need to KO ADP, and this is where the
Hmm.
essentially no weakness issue comes into play massively. Now, right now,
Right.
Dragon Pokemon actually don't have weakness, but as I said, fairies were bad. They weren't being printed pretty much, so they were pretty bad. And then the 280 HP, very hard to KO. And if they miss the KO, then they could use Ultimate Ray, which we were talking about how Pikachu and
Hmm.
Zekrom broke the game, kind of. It was very, very good. Pretty much one of the best decks in format since it came out. ADP just has Pikrom's attack, arguably better. Which would you say is better?
What between Pikarom and ADP?
With their first attack, yeah.
I don't know. I certainly think Ultimate Rays. I'm more afraid of that as an opponent. I got to say, because 150 in the Excel, I just think that one's tougher. But
Yeah, I mean
I'm not
they
sure.
do pretty much the same thing, but
With Alter Creation, then it's a lot. It's tough. Puts you in a tough spot.
yeah, like but I'm saying without Alter Creation, they're like the same attack, but
Yeah.
that's Picarom's like big thing. This is just an afterthought of ADP. It's
Right.
like, oh, and you're taking extra prizes, you do more damage, and oh, you got a KO. You KO'd
Hmm.
their Dedenne GX, which like every deck played, on
Right.
and you KO that like turn two or three for half your prizes, and then you just KO to support Pokemon for half their prizes, and you just set up any Pokemon in the game you want because you can just accelerate three basic energy. So that'd probably be Zacian V. And now your opponent's looking at you, and then they concede because they lost. And so,
Yeah.
like, pretty much you'd be unbeatable. You could put in fun text with this as well, though. And this is
Hmm.
where I think my thoughts on this deck diverge from other people's. I like this a lot. It was certainly playing against it wasn't the most fun, but it was kind of fun to it was fun to play, right? It was
You were one of those bullies that played ADP and enjoyed beating all your opponents. Just admit it.
well, okay, I do like that it like won all the time. When I said that Pikarom auto lost every matchup, ADP like auto won every matchup because it was very good. And then you'd
Hmm.
play it with Zacian, but then you could also this out of all the tag teams except for Mewtwo and Mew, which was designed to be a distinctly had to be a toolbox deck, unless it's a tech option, which isn't a Mewtwo Mew deck.
Hmm.
You'd play this as like you could pair it with so many different things because of the dragon typing and the ability to accelerate energy. Of
Yeah.
course, there was Zacian V, as I said, Keldeo GX, which I also mentioned. You could pair it with Mewtwo Mew, which actually won. Oh wait, did it win? No, it came second in the World's Replacement, the Pog 2, which I mentioned earlier. It came second with Mewtwo Mew and ADP,
Hmm.
and so it was very, very impressive. And then also, it just had so many fun combinations. You could pair it with near the end of its lifetime with the Glaring Bird Trio or a duo. I guess you
Hmm.
wouldn't play Articuno, but it was very, very fun with so many different options. You could even play it with Bronzong with some fun techs. I think I've really, really enjoyed this guy.
Yeah. I mean, look, going against it, your only option really was to knock out ADP after Alter Creation. I mean, obviously you could do it before, even better. But if you could knock out once Alter Creation happened and then Ultimate Ray, the game was over. I don't know what decks could come back from that. Really, maybe Pikarom could, maybe, but
No, no, it could
you're in a
not.
tough spot. Now in expanded, you did have Ranger card because certainly expanded gone up against a lot more there too, but Ranger just shuts it down. So there you have a one card tech that just removes Alter Creation from the rest of the game. So, but that wasn't available in standard here, so
Yeah.
you're safe from that.
Yeah. Um. So I think it's fun though. Did you play it or not really?
I didn't get my hand on it till very late. I played it a little bit, The problem is that, like I said, I think it made a lot of decks unplayable. And in that regard, it's bad. You know, it might have been bad for the game because I'd rather have more deck choices that people are playing.
Yeah, people say it killed like single prizers, but I didn't really. Like you could I mean, okay, it was bad for single prizers, but
You
really
know,
like
if you
tag
have
teams as a whole.
Cephalon and could build it up in just one shot the ADP quickly, but you know, single prizes basically weren't doing that. So you know, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And evolution Pokemon certainly weren't an option, like single prize evolution, because you were never going to get the turns to get those off. And it's
Yeah.
nice if people can play those.
Yeah, but really like with VMAXs and tag teams, they weren't ever really viable. Like current
Yeah.
standard, no one plays evolutions except for Zoroark, which is kind of the closest Pokemon we've seen to Mewtwo Mew, having so many options. Like it has a tool to one shot like every Pokemon in the game,
Mhm.
and it's still bad. So I
Yeah.
don't think cards like I don't think you can blame ADP for single prizers being bad now.
That is certainly true. You're right. I mean, the big multi-prize Pokemon, which we still have in the game, makes single prizers tough. And in some sense, I think Pokemon wanted to go out with a bang with the last tag team here at the end because this became overpowering. And I think it's an interesting lesson to remind us that people didn't think ADP was good when it was coming out, and obviously people could be and it was well off the mark. So that still happens, those type of miscalculations.
Yeah, but do you have anything else to say about them? I certainly think
I think at
I don't think ADP is that badly designed. I certainly see some design flaws where it like hurts a number of like single prizers, but it doesn't. It's not the reason. That's not the only reason certainly that single prizers are bad.
I think at the when single prizes were like getting towards rotation, I think people were very down on them, the tag team Pokemon.
Yeah,
Um, but now that we've had some time without them, I think people are more fond of them and think enjoyed it. So you know, they were tag teams. I think were in I think a reasonable development. I think it's also nice that they only did it for a year. You know, keeping the card set small for these massive Pokemon is probably a good decision also.
yeah. One thing that I think is actually more problematic that they cut out was evolution GXs. Um,
Hmm.
in all my time of playing Pokemon, as I said, I didn't play. I've always played since the teams were out or newer. I've never once seen anyone play an Evolution GX, other
Yeah.
than through either weird means like Elusive Master, which is Greninja GX's ability, or like just some very strange stuff. But I've never seen anyone just like be like, yeah, I'm playing a Stage 2 GX deck. I played one, which was Incineroar GX, which was bad.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I've never like really seen anyone play them. They were just pushed out with tag teams. Zoroark GX was the only one that was sort of viable until it rotated. And I guess at the same time, Nagnatal GX was okay, but and it wasn't that good.
Yeah, I mean having a basic Pokemon, even though it gave up one extra prize, was just much better than the ones you had to evolve. So, but it then you know obviously with EXs coming out and being so you know evolving to the EX that will be nice to see that work in standard, and we'll get to experience that for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to make sure that they're more viable. They've kicked up their HP by like 100, so they'll probably be viable now.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it actually plays itself out. So when versus with the other options people have. Um, So anyway, any final thoughts here on tag team? I think we've kind of get at the end of the discussion there.
Yeah, I think one last thing to say. We are the ultimate tag team podcast.
We should probably trademark that, shouldn't we?
Yeah,
So
I
for our
think we should do
originality
that.
there. And so obviously, you know, check out our YouTube channels, uh, Uncommon Fossil and 10 Types. One of these days, we'll actually figure out how to actually publish a podcast. But until then, you can check us out on our YouTube channels. You want to take us out, Sam? 10
Yes, sir.
Types?
Yeah, so obviously press subscribe because we are, as I said, the best tag team podcast. And
Yep.
then also like that's really appreciated. And then comment down below what platforms you'd like to see this on, if we're able to figure that one out. Also, just your thoughts on tag teams, on Malamar, and comment down below how many of those questions you got right. Also, comment down below if you made it to the end. This has been going on for a little while now. I've been enjoying making these. I hope you've enjoyed listening to them. I hope you've listened to them. I'll say that. But as always, we're both excited to see you in the next podcast.